A short while later, I heard the shower turn on, a clear sign that she had gone in to freshen up. The steady sound of running water filled the quiet, providing a calming rhythm as I waited for my turn. Before long, she emerged, her movements light and quiet as she returned to her room. With the bathroom now free, I gathered my things and stepped inside, ready to wash away the day. As the warm water flowed over me, I felt the tension in my body gradually melt away. The shower provided a brief but much-needed escape, a moment of solitude where the outside world seemed to fade into the background. Steam filled the small space, enveloping me like a cocoon, while my thoughts drifted aimlessly. Once I finished, I dried off and made my way back to my room, feeling refreshed and ready to relax. But my peace was short-lived. Moments later, Carol walked silently into my room, her intentions clear. Without hesitation, she straddled me, pulling down my boxers as I lay on the bed, still trying to process everything that was happening. A wave of confusion, fear, and helplessness surged through me, leaving me frozen and unsure of how to react. The situation was spiraling out of control, and I felt utterly trapped. Part of me wanted to resist, but I was overwhelmed by the situation. Plus, Carol was also sexy naked with big juicy brown butt, just the way I like them. To be honest, she was irresistible. I couldn't fight it. And as conflicted as I felt, I have to admit that having sex with Carol felt good, and so different. I loved the way she moaned while she was having orgasm, and her dirty talk took me to another level. As soon as we were done, Carol looked at me and said something that struck with me. "I wonder why Mimi is so in love with you." Then she added, "This need to stay a secret just between us, and don't you dare tell any of you crazy friends." Her words echoed in my head, and the weight of what had just happened hit me. I knew I had just crossed a line, and I was torn between the guilt I felt for betraying Mimi and the fear of what could happen if she finds out. Carol's statement hung in the air, thick with tension and uncertainty. "Now on, this is how it's going to be," she said, her tone almost casual, as if we were discussing the weather. "I get my part, and you get yours too. No need to panic or make a big deal out of it. Aren't you happy to have two beautiful girls just to yourself?" I felt a rush of conflicting emotions, confusion, fear, and a hint of excitement. It was as if I was standing on the edge of a cliff, teetering between two worlds, one with Mimi, who had captured my heart, and another with Carol, who was suddenly thrust into my life in an unexpected and complicated way. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not interested in jeopardizing my relationship with Mimi," I said firmly, hoping to convey the seriousness of my feelings. "I care about her too much for that." The words felt heavy, laden with the truth of my emotions. I could see Carol's expression shift slightly. She was still smiling, but there was a flicker of something, maybe disappointment or challenge, behind her eyes. "I'm not asking you to leave her," I continued, searching for the right words. "I just need to know that I want to be part of it too." I hoped to assert my boundaries while also acknowledging the uninvited complexity that Carol was introducing into my life. Carol leaned back slightly, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "So, you want both of us, huh?" she replied, a smirk playing on her lips. "That's bold. Most guys would jump at the chance." I felt a rush of frustration at her nonchalance. "It's not about wanting both of you. It's about not losing what I have with Mimi," I clarified, my voice more urgent now. "I don't want to hurt her. This was never part of the plan." There was a moment of silence between us, and I could feel the weight of my words settling in the room. I was acutely aware of the emotional stakes. My relationship with Mimi was precious, and I didn't want it tarnished by this unexpected turn of events. Carol seemed to reconsider my stance. "Okay," she said slowly, "but just know that I'm not going anywhere. I can be good to you too. You don't have to make it so complicated." The allure of her words tugged at me, and I felt the pull of temptation. I had never intended for things to evolve this way, yet here I was, caught in a web of desire and fear. I knew I had to tread carefully, for every choice I made from this point forward could alter the course of my relationship with Mimi in ways I couldn't fully understand. For a couple of weeks, I found myself entangled in a complicated and emotional triangular affair with Mimi and Carol. It was exhilarating and thrilling at times, but underneath it all, guilt gnawed at me. I felt terrible knowing that Mimi was completely unaware of what was happening behind her back. Every moment spent with either girl was overshadowed by the fear of what might happen if the truth came to light. I managed to navigate both relationships with a mix of charm and secrecy, trying to keep each girl satisfied while also maintaining the fragile balance between them. But it was exhausting. I found myself constantly on edge, worrying about being caught or slipping up in a way that could reveal my double life. Then came the day I decided to surprise Mimi with a vacation, a chance to escape the pressures of school and our complicated lives for a bit. I wanted to show her how much she meant to me and to reaffirm my commitment to our relationship. As I planned the getaway, I felt a rush of excitement at the thought of creating beautiful memories with her. But when I shared the news with Mimi, I could sense the jealousy simmering in Carol. She was not pleased that I was taking Mimi away, and she quickly resorted to threats. Carol texted me, expressing her anger and jealousy, insisting that she would tell Mimi everything if I didn't make things right with her. The tension between us escalated, and I could feel the heat of her frustration. In that moment, I had to make a choice. I knew I was falling deeper for Mimi and wanted to commit fully to her. I couldn't let Carol dictate my actions, no matter how intense her feelings were. I resolved to focus on my project with Mimi and enjoy our time away together, even if it meant facing the fallout with Carol later. As I left for the vacation with Mimi, Carol's messages bombarded my phone, but I put it on silent mode and sometimes even turned it off, trying to escape the chaos. I wanted to be fully present for Mimi and not let Carol's jealousy ruin what was supposed to be a special trip. My mind was made up. I would deal with Carol upon my return. But for now, I was determined to cherish every moment with the girl I truly loved. Mimi and I spent our days exploring new places, laughing, and connecting on a deeper level. Each sunset felt like a promise of a brighter future together, and I began to hope that this trip would solidify our bond and help me find a way out of the mess I had created with Carol. But I knew that the resolution wouldn't come easy, and the shadows of my double life loomed over me, waiting to be confronted once I returned home. Upon my return from the vacation with Mimi, I hoped that things would settle back into a routine. Carol seemed calm at first, and I thought maybe the storm had passed. Wanting to keep things cordial, I invited her out to dinner, hoping we could discuss our situation openly. I had planned to suggest that we let go of the affair for good. But then she dropped a bombshell that shattered my already fragile world. "I'm pregnant," she said, her tone serious. "And I'm keeping it. You're the father." For a moment, I thought she was bluffing, trying to manipulate me or maintain control over the situation. But the look on her face was unwavering, filled with a determination I had never seen before. The gravity of her words sank in, and panic surged through me. My mind raced as I tried to process what this meant for my life, my future, and my relationship with Mimi. "Carol, you can't be serious," I stammered, trying to find the right words. "It's only been 2 weeks since you've missed your period. Are you sure you're really pregnant? You should consider terminating it." She looked at me, a mixture of defiance and vulnerability in her eyes. "I'll think about it," she replied, her tone suggesting that she had already made up her mind. I could sense that this wasn't just a decision I could influence with logical reasoning. This was her life, and now it was intertwined with mine in a way I never anticipated. My world felt like it was collapsing around me. How could I manage this? I loved Mimi and wanted to build a future with her. Yet here I was, faced with the possibility of becoming a father to a child I didn't even want. The pressure of school was already heavy on my shoulders. I was a junior, trying to focus on my studies, but now everything felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Thoughts of what I had done to Mimi flooded my mind. I had betrayed her trust in the worst possible way. I wanted to be honest with her, to tell her everything. But how could I burden her with this? I imagined the heartbreak in her eyes, the confusion and anger she would feel. I couldn't bear the thought of losing her, but the reality of my situation was undeniable. As the days passed, I found myself spiraling into a state of anxiety and uncertainty. Every moment spent with Mimi was tainted by the knowledge that I was leading a double life, one filled with love and hope, and the other fraught with guilt and fear of impending fatherhood. I needed to make a decision, but each choice felt like a betrayal to one of the women in my life. Eventually, I decided I had to confront Carol. I couldn't let this situation dictate my life any longer. I needed to understand what she truly wanted and how I could navigate this mess without losing myself or the future I envisioned with Mimi. I steeled myself for the conversation, knowing it would change everything. I reached out to Carol, requesting we meet in a private setting to discuss the situation. I wanted to approach this conversation with a calm demeanor, though inside I was a whirlwind of emotions. Fear, guilt, and uncertainty clashed within me. As I drove to our usual meeting spot, a small cafe just off campus, I wondered how I would balance honesty and sensitivity. When I arrived, Carol was already sitting at a table, her expression unreadable. I took a deep breath and joined her, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "I think we need to talk about what you told me." She nodded, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. "I've been thinking about it too. It's a lot to take in, I know." "Right," I started, searching for the right words. "I just want to be clear about where we both stand. I care about you, but I can't pretend that this is what I wanted or expected. I didn't plan for this to happen." "I didn't either," she interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "But it did. And now we have to figure out what to do." I felt the heat of frustration creeping up my neck. "I want to understand your feelings about the pregnancy. I think we both know this isn't the right time for either of us to start a family. I'm focused on school, on Mimi. I want to be there for you, but I can't do this if it means ruining everything I have with her." Carol looked at me, her expression softening. "I get that you care about Mimi, but you can't just pretend I don't exist. This is real. I'm not trying to trap you or anything, but I need to know if you're going to support me through this. If not, I might as well raise this baby on my own." Her words struck me like a punch to the gut. "I don't want to abandon you," I said, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. "But I can't be a father right now. Not like this." Carol's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy for her. "I don't know what to do either," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I just thought that maybe we could figure this out together." I took a moment to collect my thoughts. "What if you considered terminating the pregnancy? I know it's a big decision, but you're still so early along. You have your whole life ahead of you." Carol's face hardened. "You're asking me to end a life, Michael. How can you say that? It's my choice, and I'm not going to make it lightly." Carol's face hardened. "You're asking me to end a life, Michael. How can you say that? It's my choice, and I'm not going to make it lightly." I knew I had to tread carefully. "I'm not trying to take that choice away from you. I just want you to consider all the options. We're both so young and we're not ready for this. It would change everything." After a long silence, she finally spoke. "I'll think about it, but I can't promise anything. You have to understand that this is my body, my decision. But I want you to be there for me, whatever I choose." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. "I'll support you, but I need you to understand that my priority is with Mimi. I don't want to lose her over this." The tension in the air hung heavy as we finished our conversation, both of us unsure of what would come next. I left the cafe with my mind racing, grappling with the reality that my life was about to change in ways I could hardly fathom. The next few days felt like a blur. I continued to spend time with Mimi, trying to keep things normal while the weight of my Secret grew heavier. Every laugh we shared felt like a betrayal to Carol, and every moment spent with her felt like a step further away from Mimi. Mimi had been planning a weekend getaway for us, a chance to escape the stress of school and just enjoy each other's company. I felt torn between wanting to embrace that time together and the anxiety of facing the reality of my situation with Carol. I knew that once we left, I'd be stepping further into a lie, but I couldn't bear the thought of ruining what we had. As the weekend approached, I knew I had to make a choice. Would I come clean to Mimi before we left, or would I risk everything for just a little more time in our happy bubble? The decision weighed heavily on my heart, and I knew I couldn't run away from it forever. Mimi somehow found out that her cousin Carol was pregnant after Carol confided in her, but hadn't revealed who the father was. For a few days, Mimi had already noticed signs. Carol was acting differently, and her body was changing in subtle ways. Knowing her cousin well, Mimi was aware that Carol wasn't the type to keep secrets for long when pressed. Eventually, Carol admitted she was pregnant, but confessed to Mimi that she didn't know who the father was, as she had been with multiple partners. One evening, after class, Mimi casually brought it up while we were sitting in my apartment. She looked at me with a teasing smile and said, "So, you couldn't do your job, huh? I leave you with my cousin, and she ends up pregnant. You were supposed to keep an eye on her. I thought I could trust you." I was taken aback but tried to remain composed, laughing nervously. "What are you talking about, Mimi? Carol's a grown woman. She knows what she wants. I'm not here to be her guardian, you know." My voice was steady, but inside, a storm of guilt and panic brewed. Mimi just chuckled, shrugging as she responded, "I know, babe. It's just so irresponsible of her to let something like that happen. And the fact that she doesn't even know who the father is. Crazy, right?" Then came the moment that made my heart stop. She added, still grinning, "I hope it's not you." She laughed loudly, her trust in me evident. I tried to force a smile, but the weight of her words felt like a punch to the gut. "Babe, come on. You know I'd never do that to you," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm while the room felt like it was closing in on me. Mimi shook her head, still laughing. I know. I trust you too much for that." Her laugh echoed in the room, but I couldn't shake the knot tightening in my chest. She trusted me. Too much. And if she knew the truth. Carol came home that afternoon while Mimi and I were seated in the living room, enjoying a quiet moment together. As soon as she walked in, she passed by us without saying a word. There was no greeting, no glance in Mimi's direction, just silence and a quick, cold look thrown my way. It was that look that made my stomach drop. I could sense the anger bubbling beneath her calm exterior. She was furious, not just with me, but with seeing Mimi and me sharing time together. Mimi noticed too, glancing over at me, clearly surprised. "What's up with her?" she asked, concerned by Carol's sudden coldness. Without a word, Carol stormed into her bedroom and slammed the door shut, the sound echoing through the apartment. "I don't know," Mimi said, standing up from the couch. "Let me go talk to her." She started to head toward Carol's room, but I reached out and gently stopped her. "Mimi, just leave her alone for now," I said calmly, though inside I was anything but calm. She probably just had a rough day. You know how it is. Coming back from class stressed, and with the pregnancy, her hormones must be all over the place. It's best not to push her right now. Mimi hesitated, glancing back toward Carol's door, her worry still evident. "Yeah, I guess you're right," she sighed, sitting back down next to me. "I just don't understand why she'd act like that." I nodded, trying to mask my own tension. "She'll be fine. Just need some space." But deep down, I knew this was more than just a bad day or hormones. Carol was struggling with seeing me and Mimi together, and I could feel the weight of the secret looming larger with every encounter. A few minutes after Carol stormed into her room, my phone buzzed with a message. When I checked it, it was from her. The text read, You know I hate seeing you with that right? It crushes my heart seeing both of you so happy. And what about me? Don't I deserve some of that happiness too? I stared at the message for a moment, feeling the weight of her words sink in. It was the jealousy and frustration I had been expecting, but seeing it spelled out like that made it more real. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to think, and I didn't want to escalate anything right then. Mimi, always so perceptive, noticed the shift in my mood. "What's going on, babe?" she asked softly, tilting her head in concern. "You seem off." I quickly put my phone down, trying to act casual. "Oh, nothing. Just something from school," I said, forcing a smile. "It's nothing important." She looked at me for a moment, as if trying to read between the lines, but then nodded. "Okay, if you say so." She leaned back into me, resting her head on my shoulder, content for the moment. But as Mimi settled back into the moment, I felt the weight of the secret pressing harder on me. Carol's message, her jealousy, and the looming threat of everything unraveling weighed heavily on my mind. I knew I had to find a way to handle this before it spiraled out of control. The mood was bad. We had to go to Mimi's apartment. After spending a couple of intimate time with Mimi, I decided it was time for me to head back to my place. It was around 9 p.m. when I walked into my apartment, expecting some peace and quiet. The living room was empty, and for a brief moment, I thought Carol wasn't home. But when I reached my bedroom, I froze. There she was, lying under the sheets, on my bed, waiting. As soon as I stepped inside, she dramatically threw the sheets off, revealing herself. She wasn't wearing anything. Her legs wide open, letting her pink pussy show. That juicy pink pussy looking at me like, "Come on, dude, you know you want some of this." Her boobs were so firm and juicy made it irresistible, but I stood there, trying to stay composed, knowing that this situation was escalating. "What are you doing in my bedroom?" I asked, my voice low but firm. "You know Mimi could walk in at any moment." Carol just smiled slyly, brushing off my concern. "I know Mimi already got her share," she said, her voice oozing confidence. "Now it's my turn. Come give me what I deserve. Satisfy me, big boy." I stood my ground and replied, "What makes you think you deserve anything from me?" She looked at me, unfazed, and said, "Aren't you the father of my unborn baby? It's like we're already a couple. So, please come take care of me. Do it for the baby." Her words hit me like a punch. The weight of the situation, Carol's manipulation, the pregnancy, the affair, was suffocating. I didn't want any of this, but it was spiraling out of control, and she knew how to twist the knife. I felt trapped, torn between protecting my relationship with Mimi and dealing with the consequences of my actions with Carol. As exhausted as I was, I firmly told Carol that I couldn't fulfill her request. "I'm not obligated to do anything, just because you ask," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Carol looked at me with a mixture of frustration and pleading. "Listen, just satisfy me one last time," she said. "I've decided to go back to my mother's house in a few weeks, so you and Mimi can be together without me. I'll raise my baby alone. I'll keep you informed of any special events, but not as its father, just as someone special in its life. No one will ever know the truth. It'll be our secret." Just as she was about to continue, we suddenly heard a familiar voice coming from the doorway. "What secret?" Mimi's voice was sharp, and it cut through the tension like a knife. My heart stopped. There she was, standing at the door, eyes wide in shock and confusion. "And what are you doing in his bedroom like this? Exposed?" Mimi's voice was laced with disbelief and betrayal. The shock on Carol's face was instant, but mine was worse. I felt the room closing in on me, the air suddenly heavy. Mimi had come back because she wanted to check on her cousin, thinking Carol wasn't feeling well. But instead, she stumbled onto a truth too heavy for any explanation. I knew there was no escaping this. I had to come clean, right then and there. I swallowed hard and tried to find the words. Mimi, I need to explain. Things escalated quickly. The disbelief on Mimi's face turned into anger. Explain what? She snapped, her eyes filled with hurt. How long has this been going on? How could you do this to me? So my pussy is not good enough so you had to fuck my cousin too. I struggled to find the right words, but I had to say it. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Carol and it just happened. But it's over now. Over? Mimi shouted, her voice filled with disbelief. She's pregnant, for God's sake, and you're telling me it's over? She paused, her face hardening as realization hit her. Oh, now I get it. That's why she couldn't tell me who the father was. She turned to Carol, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. And you? This is how you treat family? You're my sister, for God's sake. How could you do this to me? Things got out of hand so quickly that Mimi stormed out of the apartment, leaving me standing there. Helpless, I rushed after her, trying to stop her. But she pushed me away with a look of pure anger and heartbreak. Get out of my way, she shouted. I could only stammer an apology, desperately trying to explain. But Mimi wasn't having it. Go back to the future mother of your child, she yelled as she walked away, her voice breaking. And don't you ever call me again. Lose my number. My world crumbled right then and there. I stood speechless, paralyzed with regret, watching her disappear from my life. The thought of losing Mimi forever hit me like a truck. I couldn't imagine a future without her. I followed her a few more steps, hoping to say something, anything, to make her listen. But Mimi spun around, her face red with anger, and warned me, "Stay away from me, or I'll call the police." That hit me hard. I stopped, knowing I had no choice but to let her go. I turned back, my heart heavy with guilt, and walked to my apartment. Inside, the regret was suffocating. Every second I cursed the day I'd agreed to let Carol move in. I went straight to my bedroom and collapsed on the bed, my mind spinning with everything that had just happened. Carol knocked softly, probably trying to check on me, but I'd locked the door. I didn't want to face her or anyone else. She left me alone for a while, but slid a note under my door a few minutes later. I didn't even glance at it. I was too focused on the crushing weight of losing Mimi. I spent the night calling Mimi over and over again, but she didn't answer. I knew she was fragile, and the thought of hurting her in the worst possible way ate at me. I couldn't sleep. My mind was a storm of guilt, regret, and longing for her. How could I have done this to someone I loved so deeply? The next morning, after a restless night, I checked my phone again. Still nothing from Mimi. My heart sank, even lower. Then I noticed the note Carol had slid under the door the night before. I picked it up, intending to tear it to shreds out of sheer frustration. But something held me back. I opened it and started reading. It was an apology. Carol wrote that she was sorry for everything, and though she knew she'd caused so much harm, she confessed that her love for me was real. She said it was strong and consuming, and she couldn't hold it back anymore. That's why things had spiraled out of control. But at that moment, her words didn't matter. Nothing mattered except Mimi. I put the note down, feeling conflicted and even more trapped. Carol's apology didn't change the damage that had been done. For 3 weeks, Mimi managed to avoid me entirely. She blocked my number, making it impossible to reach her. It was pure hell. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and every moment was consumed with the weight of my mistakes. I felt desperate, not knowing how to fix things. Out of desperation, I decided to reach out to Mimi's best friend, Nadine, hoping she could help me somehow. Nadine and I had always been good friends, and I thought that if anyone could get through to Mimi, it would be her. When she picked up the phone, I tried to explain everything, how things had spiraled out of control, how much I regretted everything, and how deeply I still loved Mimi. But Nadine's response was not what I had hoped for. She listened quietly at first, but when I was done, she was furious. "I can't believe you," she snapped, her voice filled with anger. I always thought you were better than this. I understand what happened, but that doesn't mean I can forgive you for betraying Mimi like that. You broke her heart, and I don't know if she'll ever recover from this. Hearing those words from Nadine, someone I had trusted and confided in, made everything feel so much worse. It was like a final confirmation of how badly I had messed up. Nadine was hurt not only because I had betrayed Mimi, but also because she had thought I was different, someone she could count on to be loyal to her best friend. Now, that trust was shattered too. I'm sorry, I whispered, but it felt empty. What could I possibly say that would make this right? Nadine sighed. Look, you need to give Mimi time. If she ever wants to talk to you again, that's her choice. But for now, don't expect me to help you with this. With that, she hung up, and I was left feeling even more alone. Everything seemed to be falling apart, and no matter how hard I tried to find a way back to Mimi, it felt like the damage was irreparable. A couple of days after the chaos, I received a text from Mimi asking me to meet her at the nearest park by the university. My heart pounded as I read her message. I didn't waste a second and rushed to the park, almost like I'd become the Flash. I arrived so quickly that even Mimi was surprised to see me there that fast. We sat down on the bench, and the weight of the silence between us felt like it could crush me. Mimi didn't say anything at first, just stared at me for what felt like an eternity. I couldn't take it. I broke the silence, my voice shaky as I kept repeating, "Sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." The guilt was eating me alive. After a few minutes, she finally spoke. Her words hit me like a tidal wave. "You don't have to apologize," she said softly. "It's my fault. I shouldn't have asked you to accept her as your roommate." I looked at her, confused, as she continued. "You're such a special person that 95% of the women who get to know you personally would fall for you." Mimi then mentioned that Nadine had called her. "That beast was so mad at you," she said with a weak smile. But then her expression softened. But she also brought me back to my senses. She reminded me that I was the one who introduced Carol to you. There was a pause before she added, "Carol blackmailed you because she thought she could win you over me. And I can only imagine how painful it is for you too." She took a deep breath, her eyes still filled with hurt. "It's painful, thinking about what you shared with her. It hurts so much, but I'm going to let it go," she said, her voice cracking a bit. "I still love you, and I'm not going to let this thing break us up." Hearing those words felt like a lifeline had been thrown to me in the middle of the storm. I didn't know how to respond at first. Part of me wanted to cry, to hug her, to tell her everything would be different. But another part of me still felt the weight of my mistakes. Mimi's forgiveness was something I hadn't expected, and I realized at that moment just how much I truly loved her, and how much I was willing to fight for our relationship. A couple of weeks later, as things began to settle down, Carol decided it was time to move back to her mother's house. There was no grand farewell, just the quiet understanding that the best thing for everyone was distance. Carol left without much fuss, but the weight of the past lingered. Mimi, whose apartment lease was almost up, made the decision to break it early and move in with me. The air between us still held the echoes of everything that had happened. But we were determined to move forward together. Living together in that apartment for another year was a turning point. It wasn't always easy, but we found a rhythm, a routine, a life we were slowly building together. The past was behind us, and we were determined to focus on what was ahead. After graduation, we took the next big step, moving into a cozy single-bedroom apartment downtown. The space was small, but it felt like a fresh start, a chance to leave all the messiness behind and focus on our future. Chicago was the next chapter. We both had jobs lined up, and the excitement of starting our careers gave us new purpose. We settled into our lives. A couple of weeks after Carol moved back to her mother's home, things between Mimi and me seemed to fall into place. Mimi's apartment lease was nearly up, so she made the decision to move in with me. It was a big step, but after everything we'd been through, we knew that living together would only strengthen our bond. We spent the next year in that same apartment, learning more about each other, growing as a couple, and finally putting the past behind us.